Welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. President Trump doesn't believe Iran's denial of the attack in Saudi Arabia. U.S. has response planned. Expert predicts gas price increase after oil field attacks in Saudi Arabia. And almost 50,000 auto workers on strike after talks between GM and union break down. Burglars steal an 18-karat gold toilet on exhibit in England. President Trump today questioning Iran's denial that it was behind an attack on Saudi Arabia's largest oil processing facility on Saturday. NTD's Holly Kellum has the details.
President Trump tweeted on Monday that he didn't believe Iran's denial, comparing it to when the Iranians shot down a U.S. drone in June. The Iranians said it was in their airspace, while U.S. officials said it was clearly not. They stuck strongly to that story, knowing that it was a very big lie, Trump wrote. As for a U.S. response to the attack, Trump told reporters Monday that Saudi Arabia will primarily be responsible. But he also said that the U.S. might help pay for the counterstrike, with Saudi Arabia expected to contribute.
Not looking to get into new conflict, but sometimes you have to.
He said he considered a lethal counterstrike to be proportional to the attack on Saudi Arabia. Yemen's Houthi rebels, who are supported by Iran, initially claimed responsibility for the attack. However, both the U.S. and Saudi Arabia blame Iran for it. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
The attack on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities has shot up oil prices by as much as 20%, knocking out more than 5% of the world's oil supply. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on how this may affect Americans at the gas pump over the next few weeks.
It was a severe blow to Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. Oil prices surged after the attack, the largest intraday jump in almost 30 years. The oil company Aramco has confirmed a loss of nearly 6 million barrels of oil a day. But what sort of impact could this have on American consumers? We spoke to an oil analyst who told us that an increase in gas prices is expected.
I think that's eventually going to translate to higher retail prices in probably that 15 to 20 cent area. But again, you're not going to see it tonight or maybe even tomorrow. But as we get later in the week, you'll see prices start to really move higher.
President Trump responded to the possible consequences on Twitter. I have authorized the release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve if needed in a to-be-determined amount sufficient to keep the markets well supplied. The administration firmly believes that Iran is behind the attack. Meanwhile, the Middle Eastern country has dismissed those allegations. Cinque explained that the administration is taking a measured approach to the situation.
I guess the big question is how long is the Saudi infrastructure going to be down? Is it going to be measured in days or is it going to be measured in months? That's the big question right now.
Whether it's from the U.S. or Saudi Arabia, Cinque said there may be retaliation. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
A massive explosion rocked a center for people with disabilities this morning, killing one firefighter and injuring residents and bystanders.
A little after 8 o'clock this morning, officials were checking out a complaint about a propane smell just before an explosion destroyed the LEAP facility in Farmington, Maine. LEAP stands for Life Enrichment Advancing People. The center is home to and helps people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But the building now lies in ruins. There is no word yet from investigators on how many were hurt or if the propane smell is connected to the explosion.
The United Auto Workers Union went on a nationwide strike at General Motors just after midnight Sunday, with more than 49,000 hourly workers on strike. Negotiations resumed in Detroit today after breaking off during the weekend.
Workers shut down 33 manufacturing plants in 9 states across the U.S., as well as 22 part distributing warehouses.
We are committed to reach a tentative agreement. When we start back in negotiations, I am sure that we will be refocused to do so just that.
The union has been fighting to stop GM from closing auto assembly plants in Ohio and Michigan and arguing that workers deserve higher pay after GM raked in years of record high profits. The union's contract with GM expired Saturday night, but contracts with the company's crosstown rivals, Ford and Fiat Chrysler, were extended indefinitely. It wasn't clear how long the walkout would last. The union says GM has barely budged during months of talks, while GM says it has made substantial offers, including higher wages, improved benefits, and factory investments. President Trump is also urging GM and the union to get together and make a deal.
And earlier this month, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors declared the National Rifle Association a terrorist group. One member of the NRA has another viewpoint.
I'm a member of NRA, but I'm not a terrorist.
Ellen Lee Zhao, a candidate for San Francisco mayor this year, is also a member of the National Rifle Association, or NRA. She says it's unacceptable that the Board of Supervisors unanimously declared it a domestic terrorist organization on September 3rd. She is a legal gun owner and says the NRA, as a nonprofit organization, was a set of safety regulations like the others have.
Because the group itself is promoting how to use guns and how to own guns safely and protect yourself, protect your family, and protect the nation when it's needed.
Declaring it a terrorist organization would mean asking the city and government to identify and blacklist vendors and contractors in contact with the NRA.
For a city to tell other people not to do business with San Francisco, or San Francisco people not to do business with people because they're related to National Rifle Association, that is a violation of the United States Constitution.
The NRA filed a lawsuit on September 9th against the city and county of San Francisco and members of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, stating that the claim violates their First and Second Amendment rights to freedom of expression and to bear arms. The organization says it will continue to defend the Constitution. Reporting by Eileen Eng, NTD News, San Francisco.
No more counting ballots with barcodes in Colorado. That's according to a new plan announced Monday by state officials designed to combat security concerns that surround voting technology. Ballots show how a person voted, while receipts show a QR code or a traditional barcode. Those codes are easily scanned and tallied, but the human eye cannot read them. Some experts argue paper ballots are needed to double-check a count and ensure its accuracy. Colorado says its new voting machines will print out paper ballots instead of receipts starting in 2021. And Hong Kongers took to the streets in their 15th week of protests, waving American and British flags during a parade. NTD reporter Jeremy Sandberg spoke with citizens who are looking to the international community for support.
Protesters gathered outside the British consulate in Hong Kong, where demonstrators held British flags and sang "God Save the Queen," petitioning the UK to apply pressure on Beijing to uphold the one country, two systems framework. Following the appeal, citizens paraded towards the Hong Kong government building.
We are still going to fight to the end, fight for our liberty. Give me liberty or give me death.
Most protesters cover their faces and are reluctant to give their full names, fearing retaliation from the Hong Kong government and the Chinese Communist regime.
The Chinese Communist Party is a threat to humanity. It's an evil organization that should not exist on this earth, right? We have been very tolerant because we say one country, two system. You have yours, we have ours, right? You don't touch us.
Protests started in opposition to a controversial bill that would allow extraditions to China and turned into 5 demands. For the bill to be completely withdrawn, an independent inquiry into police actions, retraction of the word rioters to describe protesters, amnesty for those arrested during the protests, and free elections.
5 demands, not one less. Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times.
Protesters are hoping to raise awareness with their parades to garner more international support. Many Hong Kong citizens look to the United States as a beacon of freedom and are hoping Congress will pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act.
Yes, we love Trump a lot. In Trump we trust. Because actually he is the only person in the world who dare to fight CCP. And also I think he's a great president.
Despite police banning this event and calling it an unlawful assembly, citizens continue to march in the streets, singing and chanting, "Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times." Protesters say they have no intention of stopping their demonstrations until all 5 of their demands are met. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News, Hong Kong.
US-China trade talks are set to resume in October, and while Beijing has made some recent concessions, economists say China doesn't really want to reach a deal. But in the US, both sides of the aisle are coming to a consensus. Getting tough on China is in the national interest.
China is set to revoke tariffs on 16 types of U.S. products from September 17th for a year. The announcement came from Beijing last Wednesday. President Trump also agreed to postpone the additional U.S. tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods for 2 weeks, as per Beijing's request. Last Friday, Beijing announced it would exempt purchases from U.S. soybeans, pork, and other agricultural products from punitive tariffs. Economist David Shah says despite these concessions, China still plans to play the waiting game and drag negotiations on through the 2020 presidential election.
They don't want to reform in certain things like the structural reform and all those things. Actually, those things should be beneficial to China, but still China doesn't want to do it unless Donald Trump and U.S. government force them to do it.
In the third Democratic primary debate on September 12th, the majority of candidates said that the U.S. must be tough on China in trade, and some even agree with Trump's tariff tactic.
The fact remains, they said tariffs are a valid tactic when you're dealing with a country like China that doesn't want to play by international trade rules. So what I see is a broadening sense of support in the United States for, look, we have to get tough with China. China is a big problem for us.
White House National Security Advisor John Bolton, known for his hawkish position, stepped down last Tuesday. Some worry this may lead the Trump administration to soften its position in the U.S.-China trade war.
The broader direction that this administration has been going from the White House, from the State Department, from the Defense Department, and the both parties in Congress is one that is much stronger with regard to the challenges and threats that the People's Republic of China presents.
The important lesson going forward, Yates says, is not to place too much emphasis on the personalities, but on the policies and progress that's made in the negotiations. Reporting by Kitty Wong, NTD News.
90% of the news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. Media shapes your perceptions of the world around you. If you're not getting an accurate source of media, you're not going to have an accurate understanding of the world. The mission of Declassified is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This isn't just a mission of the channel, it's a mission of those involved in it. It's something we truly believe in. Declassified is independent, not controlled by any special interests, and we never will be. They don't tell you what you can and can't cover. They say, prove it and you can publish it. Corruption has been allowed to exist in this country because the people we depend on to expose it are the ones involved in it. The Epoch Times is a non-partisan media. That means we don't stand for any political party. Our values are truth. One of the foundations of a free republic is an honest media. Without knowing the truth of the situation, without understanding the backgrounds of individuals, without knowing what they really stand for, what they're really doing, you're not going to be able to vote. You're not going to be able to make the decisions that this country depends on us to make. You can't have a free republic without an honest media, and Declassified tries to fill that role.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
And in Luxembourg, the British Prime Minister and the EU Commission President held Brexit talks today, their first meeting in their current roles. But the EU Commission says they are yet to see concrete proposals from the UK. NTD's Jane Worrell has the story.
Pulling out of the press conference because of the noise from anti-Brexit protesters, Boris Johnson's Luxembourg counterpart had free rein and played to the cameras, giving the UK
another
a warning.
extension. So let me be very clear once again. An extension is only an option if it serves a purpose. We will not grant another extension just for the sake of granting another extension.
He didn't share Johnson's optimism about getting a Brexit deal in the few remaining weeks.
Yes, I can see the shape of it. Everybody can see roughly what could be done. But it will require movement.
The Irish backstop is a mechanism that prevents a hard border coming back to Ireland. Many British lawmakers hate the idea of a backstop because it means the UK will still be tied by the EU's custom rules. It caused Theresa May's deal to be rejected by lawmakers 3 times. Johnson says that he wants to scrap the backstop, but the EU Commission President says no alternative proposal to the Irish backstop has been made. Johnson's government said Brexit talks will intensify and will soon be held on a daily basis. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
The Yellow Vests are back, and on Saturday they clashed with police in the streets of France. NTD's David Vives reports.
44 weeks after the start of the movement, the protesters took to the streets of Paris for what they call Act 44. What was a demonstration to cancel a tax hike on fuel has continued with new demands. Protesters' refrain this weekend was a call for French President Emmanuel Macron to step down.
We call for the resignation of President Macron and his government.
The atmosphere between demonstrators and police was strained. Police set up a boundary, but the demonstrators pushed past police and finally got through. The police called for reinforcements and a mobile brigade specialized in arrests arrived, but the demonstration ended peacefully and they didn't intervene. However, in Nantes, another French city, protesters in black smashed shop windows and left the graffitied slogan for a far-left group called All Cops Are Bastards. It's not clear what their relationship to the Yellow Vest protesters are. The police were also forceful, according to Sebastian Santos, who has been treating injured protesters as a street medic. Police violence is totally unjustified. We treat many people affected by tear gas, rubber bullet shots, telescopic baton bruises that cause a lot of damage. According to one police union spokesman, the officers lacked the resources and training to manage the demonstrations. An instructor came one morning and threw a grenade in front of all the policemen, and that was it, because there was not enough grenades for everyone to practice. The result was that the policemen threw them at random, and we paid for it with many wounded. The protests have continued each week since they started, but are growing in size after the summer holidays. Some Yellow Vest groups on social media are calling for a bigger protest in Paris next Saturday for Act 45.
Up next, 68-year-old woman competes in triathlon. Learn her secret to staying healthy when we come back after the break.
Factual,
honest news.
Not biased, but completely straightforward.
You're not emotionally going up and down.
Bringing morality back to newspapers.
The honest, old-fashioned journalism.
You're presenting the facts and letting the reader decide.
The Epoch Times is a fearlessly independent news media that publishes in 35 countries and 21 languages. Truth and tradition is our motto. Founded as an antidote to communist propaganda, today we're quickly becoming a household name across America. Our subscribers thank us for our relentless and unbiased coverage.
I've been part of the Epoch Times for nearly a decade because I've seen there's no other major media outlet in the world as devoted to real journalism. The Epoch Times has never had any corporate or political agenda. We only serve our readers, and we'll stay that way, no matter what.
We connected the dots around Spygate, the Obama administration's elaborate efforts against Trump's 2016 campaign. We often break news months ahead of other media on topics such as Chinese espionage, cyber warfare, subversion in America, and more. But our authoritative reporting didn't only just begin. We are tried and true.
Our paper was born out of the need to respond to a human rights catastrophe in China. It was enabled by the Communist Party's vicious and dishonest propaganda. We soon learned that Western media were picking up and amplifying the lies. The Epoch Times' truthful reporting exposed the Communist Party's lies for the Chinese people. But it also helped protect our Western audience. It disabused for them the lies in this propaganda. Our reporting has also helped uncover how communist ideas are taking root in our own country. The Epoch Times started as a small and unknown publication in one of the toughest media markets in the world. We have built it through hard work and trial and error.
We were founded in the year 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia, by Chinese Americans who had fled communist China. Our independent reporting came at a price. Our staff members in China were jailed and tortured for their reporting, some for as long as 10 years. Because our founders believed in truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, the principles of the spiritual practice Falun Gong, they felt such sacrifices were worth it to ensure for the world an independent, honest media, one that would report on the most pressing issues of our time. As many major media are losing people's trust and declining further every day, the fastest growing newspaper in America delivers truth and tradition. Look us up today.
Many women get less physically active as they age, but 68-year-old Jean Mitchell is taking on a challenge to swim, bike, and run. For her, this triathlon is not for fun or health, but for a cause. NTD's Sherwin Rong has the story.
Jean Mitchell became the third in her age group at her first local triathlon last year. She took up serious training only when she was 67 years old.
Oh, I've never run in my life before, ever. You know, when I played sports in high school, and I'm an active person, but I had never, ever run before, so that was the biggest challenge.
What stood out to people was not only her age, but also her shirt.
What does freedom for Falun Dafa mean? So I was able to tell people about, the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and about the persecution and what wonderful health it's given me. So.
From a young age, Jean suffered from illnesses, but an ancient spiritual Chinese meditation called Falun Gong has given her a second life.
I went from being sick all the time, I had a horrible immune system, to being healthy overnight. I mean, incredibly healthy.
Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, has teachings based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, as well as 5 sets of exercises, introduced to the public in 1992. It spread rapidly throughout China and the world by word of mouth, as people experienced miracles of health and moral improvement. Jean was one of them.
I feel like I found what was my meaning in life. I became what I think is a better person. I became much more considerate of people. You know, my husband said a month after doing the practice, I was easier to live with.
Since 1999, the Chinese Communist Party began persecuting Falun Gong, and thousands of people lost their lives and homes. For Jean, winning is not the goal. Her goal is to fight for the human rights of the Chinese people.
You know, when something has given you so much, you want to pay back. You want to give something back to it. So I wanted to have the triathlon to be a way of raising awareness about the persecution of Falun Gong.
She is training for a marathon next year, as well as the Cape Triathlon, and hopes that more people will know about the beauty as well as the persecution of Falun Gong this way. Reporting by Shuan Rong, NTD News.
And in Argentina, locals coming together to save killer whales stranded on the beach.
Early Monday morning, a person spotted 7 orcas stranded on a beach in Mar Chiquita and called authorities. Specialists from the Argentine Wildlife Foundation and aquariums, as well as local volunteers, worked to rescue the killer whales. While one died, the rest of the orcas were returned to open sea. Authorities are planning an autopsy on the orca that died to find out more information on how it passed away.
Up next, works of legendary Renaissance artist and mentor to Michelangelo on exhibit in New York City after the break. Burglars stole a fully functional 18-karat gold toilet from Britain's Blenheim Palace on Saturday, where it had been installed as an art exhibit.
The toilet is valued at more than $5 million and was part of an exhibition of work by Italian conceptual artist Maurizio Catalan. Thieves with at least 2 vehicles broke into the palace and removed the toilet sometime before 5 a.m. The burglary caused significant damage and flooding since the toilet was connected with the building's plumbing. Authorities arrested a 66-year-old man in connection with the theft, but had not recovered the artwork. Blenheim Palace said on Twitter it was saddened by the loss of the artwork. It said the rest of the exhibition would reopen. The palace is also the birthplace of World War II leader Winston Churchill.
He is the master for the Renaissance master Michelangelo, a favorite of famous art patrons, and the unofficial ruler of 15th century Florence. Yet his name remains relatively unknown. Today, New York's Frick collection is rediscovering the artistic ingenuity of the Renaissance sculptor.
Lyrical, stylized, evocative. Despite being lesser known than other Renaissance masterpieces, the delicate works of Bertoldo di Giovanni are the perfect testament for the artistic prosperity of 15th century Italy.
In the Renaissance, which of course means rebirth, it was all about the rediscovery of ancient examples and how that inspired the turn from medieval artwork into the Renaissance. And Bertoldo's works, almost every single one of them takes an ancient work for its inspiration.
500 years later, the first exhibition devoted to Bertoldo is being held by the Frick collection in celebration of his legacy.
Whether it's a sculpture or a medal or marble, something from the ancient world inspired Bertoldo, but he created his own visual language, all his own.
His influence can be seen in some of the most well-known works, like The Last Judgment by Michelangelo, which is surprisingly inspired by one of Bertoldo's portrait medals. It is said that if you blow up this medal to 50 times its size, you would be standing in front of a bronze version of the famous Sistine Chapel ceiling painting. The attention to detail reflected the sculptor's ambition, who worked to pass down his legacy.
Bertoldo was very prominently set as the curator and teacher in Lorenzo de' Medici's sculpture garden, where he instructed the next generation of leading artists in Florence, including Michelangelo. So we can see Michelangelo looking to Bertoldo as well as ancient sculpture for inspiration.
The exhibition opens to the public this Wednesday until January 12, 2020. Penny Jo, NTD News.
And that's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.